Sometimes the most unlikely heroes emerge from the shadows when darkness threatens to consume the innocent. In a world where cruelty often goes unchecked and the vulnerable are left to fend for themselves, one young woman's nightmare would become the catalyst for an extraordinary act of courage. This is the story of Maya Chen, a quiet transfer student whose gentle nature made her an easy target, and Marcus Rodriguez, a battle-hardened Navy SEAL whose protective instincts would forever change both their lives. What began as a simple case of workplace bullying would escalate into something far more sinister, testing the limits of human endurance and revealing the true meaning of honor, sacrifice, and unexpected heroism. In a small coastal town where everyone knew everyone else's business, a secret would unfold that would shock the community to its core and prove that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected source. Maya Chen adjusted her worn backpack straps as she walked through the glass doors of Seaside Community College for the first time. The salty ocean breeze carried the scent of possibility mixed with her own nervous energy. At 22, she had finally saved enough money from her part-time jobs to transfer from the community college back home in rural Oregon to this coastal California campus. Her dream was simple but powerful: become a marine biology teacher and help kids discover the wonders of ocean life that had captivated her since childhood. The campus buzzed with the energy of students hurrying between classes, their voices creating a symphony of youth and ambition. Maya clutched her schedule tightly, her dark eyes scanning the building numbers as she searched for her first classroom. Her long black hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her simple jeans and sweater marked her as someone who valued substance over style. She had always been quiet by nature, preferring the company of books and the peaceful observation of tide pools to the complex social dynamics that seemed to come so naturally to others. Patricia Williams, the marine biology department head, had been nothing but encouraging during their phone interviews. The older woman had praised Maya's academic record and her genuine passion for marine conservation. Maya had worked 3 jobs over 2 years to save enough money for this transfer, cleaning offices at night, tutoring struggling students, and working weekends at a local aquarium. Every sacrifice had been worth it for this moment. Her first class, Advanced Marine Ecosystems, was held in a modern laboratory overlooking the campus's research pier. Maya found a seat in the middle row, close enough to show engagement, but not so close as to draw unwanted attention. As other students filtered in, she noticed the easy familiarity between classmates who had clearly been studying together for years. Their conversations flowed naturally, from weekend plans to shared memories of previous semesters. Maya opened her notebook and began reviewing her preparatory notes, hoping to make a good impression when class discussions began. Professor Janet Harrison entered with the confident stride of someone who had been teaching for decades. Her silver hair was pulled back in a professional bun, and her eyes held the sharp intelligence that Maya had always admired in educators. After a brief welcome to the new semester, Professor Harrison's gaze settled on Maya. "We have a transfer student joining us today," she announced with a warm smile. "Maya Chen comes to us from Central Oregon Community College with an impressive academic record. Maya, would you like to tell the class a bit about yourself and what drew you to marine biology?" Maya felt her cheeks warm as 20 pairs of eyes turned toward her. She stood slowly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Hi everyone, I'm Maya, and I've been fascinated by marine life since I was a child. My goal is to become a high school marine biology teacher and help students understand how important ocean conservation is for our planet's future. I'm really excited to learn from all of you and contribute to the research being done here." The response was politely positive, with several students nodding appreciatively. Maya sat down, feeling cautiously optimistic about fitting in with her new academic community. The rest of the class period flew by as Professor Harrison outlined their upcoming research projects and fieldwork opportunities. Maya took detailed notes, already envisioning herself conducting underwater observations and contributing to meaningful scientific research. After class, Maya made her way to the campus student center for lunch. The large open space was filled with round tables where students gathered in comfortable groups, their conversations ranging from academic concerns to social plans. Maya purchased a simple sandwich and found an empty table near the large windows that offered a stunning view of the Pacific Ocean. She pulled out a marine biology textbook and began reading while she ate, occasionally glancing up to watch the waves crash against the rocky shoreline below. "Look at her, eating alone and reading like some kind of robot," a voice said nearby, just loud enough for Maya to hear. Maya glanced up to see a group of 3 students from her morning class sitting 2 tables away. The speaker was a blonde woman named Brittany, whose perfectly styled hair and designer clothes suggested she came from a very different economic background than Maya. Maybe she thinks she's too good to talk to anyone, added another girl, this one a redhead named Jessica. Did you hear how she introduced herself? Like she's going to save the world or something. Maya felt her stomach clench, but she tried to ignore the comments and focus on her reading. She had encountered similar attitudes before and knew that responding would likely make things worse. Instead, she continued eating her sandwich and reviewing the chapter on coastal ecosystem preservation, hoping the conversation would move on to other topics. But it didn't. Over the following days, Maya began to notice a pattern. Whenever she entered a room, conversations would quiet momentarily before resuming in hushed tones. When she asked questions in class, certain students would exchange meaningful glances. During group work assignments, she found herself consistently excluded from the informal groups that form naturally, forcing her to work alone or with the few other students who seemed to exist on the social periphery. The situation escalated during her second week when Maya discovered that someone had been tampering with her belongings. Her textbooks, which she kept in her assigned locker, were frequently moved around or hidden behind other items. Once she found her research notes scattered and partially torn. When she mentioned this to the student monitor, she was told that locker issues were common and she should be more careful with her things. Maya's living situation added another layer of challenge to her adjustment. She rented a small studio apartment above a fishing tackle shop in the older part of town, about 20 minutes from campus by bus. The apartment was barely furnished and somewhat isolated, but it was what she could afford on her tight budget. Her landlord, an elderly man named Mr. Bay Peterson, was kind but rarely around, leaving Maya to manage mostly on her own. The tackle shop below closed early most evenings, leaving the building quiet and somewhat eerie after dark. Maya established a routine of studying late into the night, often falling asleep over her textbooks as she worked to keep up with the rigorous coursework, while also working a part-time job at a local diner to cover her living expenses. It was during her third week that the harassment escalated beyond mere social exclusion. Maya arrived at her morning class to find that someone had written, "Go back where you came from," on her usual desk in permanent marker. Professor Harrison noticed immediately and was visibly upset, promising to investigate the incident. But when Maya returned for her afternoon lab session, she found a similar message written on her lab station, this time accompanied by crude drawings and more explicit language. The incidents began happening more frequently. Maya would find her car tires slightly deflated, not enough to be dangerous, but enough to be inconvenient and costly to fix repeatedly. Her apartment mailbox was frequently vandalized, with offensive graffiti that she had to clean off herself. Someone began making anonymous phone calls to her apartment at all hours, hanging up when she answered but leaving her unable to sleep peacefully. Maya reported each incident to campus security and local police, but the harassment was subtle enough that it was difficult to prove or trace to specific individuals. The authorities were sympathetic, but explained that without witnesses or concrete evidence, their options were limited. They advised her to keep detailed records of each incident and to consider changing her routines to make herself a less predictable target. The stress began taking a toll on Maya's academic performance and physical health. She lost weight from the anxiety and began having trouble concentrating during lectures. Her grades, which had always been exemplary, started to slip as she struggled to balance her coursework with the constant vigilance required to protect herself from further harassment. Dr. Barth Williams, her academic advisor, noticed the changes during one of their monthly check-in meetings. "Maya, you seem exhausted," she observed with genuine concern. "Is everything all right? Are you finding the coursework too challenging?" Maya hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. She valued Dr. Williams' opinion and didn't want to appear unable to handle the normal stresses of college life. "I'm just adjusting to the new environment," she said carefully. "It's taking me longer to find my place here than I expected." "Doctor?" Williams studied her with experienced eyes. "Maya, if there's something specific going on that's affecting your studies, please know that you can talk to me. We want all our students to succeed, and sometimes that means providing additional support during difficult transitions." Maya appreciated the offer, but worried that involving faculty might escalate the situation unpredictably. She thanked Dr. Williams and promised to reach out if she needed help, though she privately doubted that academic support could address the real source of her problems. As October arrived, the harassment began to feel more coordinated and threatening. Maya started noticing the same people appearing in different locations where she regularly spent time: the library, the diner where she worked, the bus stop near her apartment. While she couldn't prove she was being followed, the feeling of being watched became constant and oppressive. One particularly disturbing incident occurred when Maya found that someone had been inside her apartment while she was at work. Nothing was stolen, but her belongings had been subtly rearranged, and a message was left on her bathroom mirror, written in what appeared to be lipstick. "We know where you live." Maya immediately called the police, but without signs of forced entry, they suggested she might have simply forgotten how she had left things. The dismissive response left her feeling more isolated and vulnerable than ever. The breaking point came on a Friday evening in late October. Maya had finished her shift at the diner and was walking to the bus stop when she realized she was being followed by a car driving slowly behind her. As she quickened her pace, the car accelerated, its occupants shouting cruel remarks about her ethnicity and personal appearance. When Maya broke into a run, the car followed, its passengers laughing and continuing their verbal assault. Maya ducked into an alley, hoping to lose her tormentors, but the car blocked the alley entrance. 3 figures emerged from the vehicle, their faces partially obscured by hoodies. Maya recognized one voice as belonging to someone from her marine biology program, though she couldn't see clearly enough to identify who it was.
"You don't belong here," one of them called out.
"We've been patient, but you're not taking the hint. Time for a more direct message." Maya pressed herself against the alley wall, her heart pounding as she realized how isolated and vulnerable she was. The tackle shop below her apartment was closed. The street was empty, and her phone showed no signal in the narrow alley. As the figures advanced toward her, Maya understood that her situation had moved far beyond simple bullying into something much more dangerous. Maya's breath came in short, panicked gasps as she pressed herself against the cold brick wall of the alley. The 3 hooded figures moved closer, their shadows stretching long and menacing under the dim streetlight. She could hear their muffled laughter, cruel and predatory, as they savored her obvious terror. Her mind raced through possible escape routes, but the narrow alley offered no alternatives. The car blocked her only exit. "Please," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. "I haven't done anything to you." "That's the problem," one of them replied, his voice distorted by the hood but definitely male. "You exist. You don't fit in. You make the rest of us look bad with your perfect grades and your holier-than-thou attitude." Maya recognized something familiar in the voice but couldn't place it precisely. Her hands trembled as she fumbled for her phone, hoping desperately for even a single bar of signal. The screen showed nothing. The alley was a dead zone for cell service. Just as the closest figure reached for her, a deep voice cut through the night air like a blade. "That's enough." Everyone froze. From the shadows at the other end of the alley emerged a tall, broad-shouldered man. He moved with the fluid confidence of someone accustomed to dangerous situations, his presence immediately shifting the entire dynamic of the confrontation. Even in the dim light, Maya could see the military bearing in his posture and the controlled intensity in his approach. "This doesn't concern you, old man," the apparent leader of the group called out, trying to maintain his bravado. "Keep walking." The stranger stepped into the light, revealing a face that was weathered but not old, perhaps in his early 30s, with dark hair and eyes that held a steel-hard focus. He was wearing a simple black t-shirt and jeans, but something about his bearing suggested capabilities that went far beyond the ordinary. "Actually, it does concern me," he replied calmly. "See, I live right up there." He gestured towards the apartments above the tackle shop. "And I don't appreciate having my quiet evening disturbed by cowards who need a 3-to-1 advantage against a woman half their size." Maya felt a surge of hope mixed with new fear. While grateful for the intervention, she worried about what these people might do to someone trying to help her. She had seen enough to know they were capable of escalation. "Look, man, you don't understand the situation," the second figure said, his voice nervous now. "This girl has been causing problems, making accusations, trying to get people in trouble. We're just having a conversation with her." The stranger's expression didn't change, but something in his stance shifted subtly. Maya sensed rather than saw the change, as if he had moved from a defensive to an offensive posture without appearing to move at all. "I can see exactly what kind of conversation you're having," he said. "And it ends now. You have about 10 seconds to get back in that car and disappear before this situation becomes very unpleasant for you." The 3 figures looked at each other uncertainly. They clearly hadn't expected interference, and their victim was supposed to have been isolated and helpless. The leader took a step forward, perhaps trying to salvage his authority over the situation. "You think you can take all 3 of us?" he challenged, though his voice lacked conviction. The stranger smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Son, I've taken on more than 3 people before breakfast in places that would give you nightmares. But here's the thing. I don't want to hurt you. I want you to make the smart choice and leave. Right now." Something in his tone and manner finally broke through their false courage. The leader gestured to his companions, and they began backing toward their car, trying to maintain face while clearly eager to escape the situation. "This isn't over," the leader called out as they reached their vehicle. "We know where she lives. We know where she goes to school. You can't protect her all the time." The stranger watched them pile into their car and drive away before turning his attention to Maya. She was still pressed against the wall, her entire body shaking from the adrenaline and fear that had been coursing through her system. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice gentler now but still carrying that underlying strength. Maya shook her head, not trusting her voice. She was physically unharmed but emotionally shattered by the escalation of harassment into what had clearly been intended as a physical assault. "I'm Marcus Rodriguez," he said, extending his hand. "I live in 2B, right above you. I've been hearing some of the disturbances lately and figured you might be having trouble. Tonight confirmed it." Maya managed to find her voice. Maya Chen. "Thank you. I don't know what they would have done if you hadn't shown up." Marcus studied her face in the dim light, taking in her obvious exhaustion and the fear that still lingered in her eyes. "How long has this been going on?" he asked. Maya hesitated. She had become so accustomed to handling the situation alone that discussing it felt strange and vulnerable. But the events of the evening had stripped away her ability to pretend she could manage independently. "About a month," she admitted. "It started small, just social exclusion and minor vandalism. But it's been getting worse. Tonight was the first time they actually cornered me like this." Marcus nodded grimly. "Classic escalation pattern. They test boundaries, see what they can get away with, then gradually increase the pressure until something breaks. The question is whether that something is their victim or their courage." They walked together toward the entrance to their apartment building. Maya noticed that Marcus positioned himself between her and the street, constantly scanning their surroundings. His awareness seemed automatic and comprehensive, checking shadows, noting vehicles, assessing potential threats without appearing paranoid or obvious about it. "What do you do?" Maya asked as they climbed the stairs. "I mean, for work." "I'm between assignments right now," Marcus replied carefully. "Recently separated from the military, taking some time to figure out what comes next." Maya sensed there was much more to his story, but she didn't press for details. She was simply grateful to have discovered she wasn't as alone and vulnerable as she had believed. When they reached her apartment door, Marcus paused. "Maya, I need you to understand something. Those guys tonight, they were testing more than your resolve. They were testing whether you have any protection, any support system. Now they know you do, which might make them back off. But it might also make them more dangerous." Maya felt her momentary relief crumble. "So, I've made things worse by accepting your help?" "No," Marcus said firmly. "You didn't make things worse. They did by choosing to escalate to physical intimidation. But now we need to be strategic about how we handle this going forward." Over the following days, Maya found herself looking at her situation through new eyes. Marcus had suggested she document everything meticulously, not just for police reports but to identify patterns in the harassment. As she reviewed her notes, she began to see connections she had missed before. The incidents weren't random. They were carefully timed to avoid witnesses and surveillance cameras. The harassers knew her schedule with uncomfortable precision, appearing at locations where she would be isolated and vulnerable. Someone with access to her academic and work information was clearly coordinating the campaign against her. Marcus proved to be an invaluable ally in this analysis. His military experience had taught him to assess threats systematically, and he helped Maya understand what she was really facing. "This isn't just bullying," he explained during one of their conversations on his apartment balcony, which offered a clear view of the building's entrances and the street below. "Bullying is opportunistic and emotional. This is planned and coordinated. Someone is putting significant time and effort into making your life miserable." Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ocean breeze. "But why?" "I'm nobody special. I'm just trying to get an education and build a life." "Sometimes that's enough," Marcus replied. "Some people can't stand to see others succeed, especially if they perceive that success is undeserved. Your academic performance, your dedication, your different background, any or all of those could trigger resentment in the wrong person." The harassment continued, but with Marcus's guidance, Maya began responding differently. Instead of suffering in isolation, she started building a network of documentation and support. Marcus taught her to vary her routines unpredictably, to remain aware of her surroundings, and to trust her instincts when something felt wrong. They also worked together to identify her primary harassers. Through careful observation and Maya's growing confidence in defending herself, they determined that the campaign was primarily orchestrated by Brittany and her close friends, with support from several male students who seemed to enjoy the power dynamics involved. Marcus's background became clearer through their interactions, though he never provided extensive details. Maya gathered that he had served multiple combat deployments as a Navy SEAL and had recently left the military due to circumstances he preferred not to discuss. His knowledge of tactics and security was extensive, but so was his understanding of trauma and psychological warfare. The hardest part, he told her one evening as they reviewed the week's incidents, is not letting them convince you that you deserve what's happening. That's their ultimate goal, to make you believe you brought this on yourself by being who you are. Maya found his perspective both comforting and disturbing. Comforting because it validated her experience and helped her understand that she wasn't overreacting or imagining the severity of the situation. Disturbing because it implied a level of calculated cruelty that was difficult to accept. The situation reached a new level of intensity in early November when Maya discovered that her harassers had gained access to her academic records and personal information. Details about her financial aid status, her work schedule, and even her family background were being used against her in increasingly personal attacks. Anonymous emails began arriving in her campus account, filled with detailed threats and personal information that should have been confidential. Someone had clearly accessed her student files, but when she reported this to campus administration, she was told that system security showed no unauthorized access attempts. Marcus helped her understand the implications. Either they have someone on the inside with legitimate access, or they're more technically sophisticated than we initially thought. Either way, this represents a serious escalation. The breaking point came when Maya arrived at her apartment one evening to find her door ajar and clear signs that someone had been inside. This time, however, the intrusion was more than simple intimidation. Her computer was missing, along with her research notes and several personal items. More disturbingly, photos of Maya taken without her knowledge were scattered across her desk, showing her at various locations around campus and town. Marcus arrived within minutes of her panicked phone call, his expression darkening as he surveyed the scene. "Pack a bag," he told her without preamble. "You're not staying here tonight." Maya started to protest, but Marcus cut her off. "Maya, this crossed a line. They've graduated from harassment to stalking and breaking and entering. Your safety is more important than your independence right now." As Maya packed her essentials, her hands shaking as she tried to decide what was most important to save, Marcus conducted a thorough examination of her apartment. What he found confirmed her worst fears. Small listening devices had been planted in multiple locations, and her personal spaces had been violated in ways that went far beyond simple theft. "How long do you think they've been watching me?" Maya asked, her voice small and frightened. Marcus's expression was grim as he disabled the surveillance equipment. "Based on what I'm seeing here, probably since your second or third week. They know everything about your routine, your habits, your vulnerabilities." Maya felt her world tilting as the full scope of the invasion of her privacy became clear. Everything she had thought was private, every moment she had believed herself safe and unobserved, had been an illusion. The people tormenting her had been living in her space virtually, watching and planning and waiting for the perfect moment to destroy her sense of security completely. As they left her apartment together, Maya carrying a small bag of her most essential belongings, she realized that her life as she had known it was over. The question now was whether what came next would be better or worse, and whether Marcus's protection would be enough to see her through whatever was coming. Maya spent that night in Marcus's spare room, staring at the ceiling and trying to process the complete upheaval of her life. Every sound from the street below made her tense. Every shadow moving past the window sent her heart racing. The surveillance equipment Marcus had found in her apartment had shattered her last sense of personal safety. She felt exposed and vulnerable in ways that went beyond physical danger. Marcus had insisted she try to get some rest, but sleep was impossible. Instead, she lay awake thinking about how dramatically her simple dream of education and career had transformed into a nightmare of persecution and violation. The worst part was the growing realization that her harassers had successfully isolated her from normal campus life. She had few friends, no strong connections with faculty beyond Dr. Williams, and limited financial resources to relocate or transfer schools again. Early morning brought a gentle knock on her door. Marcus entered with 2 cups of coffee and a serious expression. "We need to talk about your options," he said, settling into the chair near the window. "What happened last night changes everything." Maya sat up, accepting the coffee gratefully. The normalcy of the gesture helped ground her in the present moment. What do you mean? I mean that we've moved beyond harassment and into criminal territory. Marcus explained. Breaking and entering, stalking, electronic surveillance. These are felonies. The police can't dismiss this as college pranks anymore. Maya felt a flicker of hope, but it was tempered by her previous experiences with law enforcement. But they never believed me before. They said there wasn't enough evidence anyway. There is now, Marcus replied, firmly. The surveillance equipment, the break-in, the photos, it's all concrete evidence of criminal activity. But here's the thing, Maya. Once we involve law enforcement seriously, your harassers are going to know their game is over. That might make them back down. Or it might make them desperate. Maya understood the implication. Desperate people often do desperate things. So what do you recommend? Marcus set down his coffee and looked directly at her. I recommend we give them a chance to walk away cleanly before we bring in the authorities. Sometimes people who've gotten in over their heads will take an exit ramp if it's offered diplomatically. Maya was skeptical. The people who had been tormenting her didn't seem like the type to respond to diplomatic overtures. But Marcus had military experience with conflict resolution, and she trusted his judgment more than her own emotional reactions. How would that work? She asked. Over the next hour, Marcus outlined a strategy that was both simple and sophisticated. Rather than confronting her harassers directly, they would make it clear that Maya was no longer isolated and vulnerable. Marcus would become visibly present in her daily routine, not as a bodyguard, but as an obvious ally. The goal was to demonstrate that the cost of continuing their campaign had increased beyond what they were willing to pay. The key, Marcus explained, is making them understand that you have protection without making it feel like a challenge to their masculinity or authority. We want them to save face while backing down. Maya returned to campus the following Monday, with Marcus accompanying her for the first time. He didn't hover or make his protective role obvious, but his presence was unmistakable. At 6'2", with the bearing of someone comfortable with conflict, he attracted attention without seeming to seek it. The response was immediate and telling. Brittany and her friends, who had grown accustomed to Maya's isolation, clearly didn't know how to handle this development. Their usual tactics of whispered comments and meaningful glances lost their power when Maya was obviously no longer alone and friendless. Dr. Williams noticed the change during Maya's marine biology lab session. Maya, you seem more confident today, she observed as Maya worked on a complex ecosystem mapping exercise. Are you settling in better? Maya glanced toward the lab windows where Marcus sat reading on a bench outside, clearly visible but not intrusive. I'm learning to build better support systems, she replied honestly. It makes a difference when you know you're not facing challenges alone. For several days, the new dynamics seemed to be working. The harassment didn't stop completely, but it diminished significantly. Maya received fewer threatening messages, found fewer signs of tampering with her belongings, and felt less like she was being constantly watched and followed. Marcus helped her establish new routines that were less predictable and more secure. They varied her routes between campus and work, changed her study locations regularly, and created backup plans for various scenarios. Maya began to feel like she was reclaiming some control over her life. But on Thursday evening, the situation exploded into open confrontation. Maya was leaving her job at the diner when she found Brittany and two male students waiting by her car. One of the men was tall and athletic, clearly accustomed to using his size to intimidate others. The other was smaller, but had an aggressive energy that seemed even more threatening. We need to talk, Brittany announced, her voice tight with anger. This whole situation has gotten out of hand. Maya looked around the parking lot, noting that it was mostly empty and poorly lit. Marcus was expecting her home within the hour, but he didn't know exactly when her shift ended. She felt her old fears returning, but tried to maintain the confidence she had been rebuilding. I don't think we have anything to discuss, Maya replied, moving toward her car door. Please move so I can leave. You brought that military guy into our business, the larger man said, stepping closer. That wasn't smart. It's made things complicated for everyone. Maya felt her anger rising alongside her fear. You made things complicated when you decided to harass and stalk me. Marcus didn't create the situation, you did. The smaller man laughed harshly. Is that what you think this is? Harassment? We were just having some fun, trying to help you understand that maybe this wasn't the right school for you. But now you've escalated things by bringing in outside help. Breaking into my apartment and planting surveillance equipment isn't fun, Maya replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. It's criminal behavior, and it stops now. Brittany's expression shifted from anger to something colder and more calculated. You can't prove anything about your apartment. And even if you could, do you really want to start a war over this? We have resources you don't have. We have connections you don't have. We can make your life very difficult in ways your military friend can't protect you from. Maya realized that they were offering her a deal, though not a fair one. Stop fighting back, accept the harassment as the price of her education, and they would keep it at manageable levels. It was the classic abuser's bargain. Submit to control and the abuse won't get worse. No, Maya said simply. I'm not going to accept being treated this way. I have as much right to be here as anyone else. The larger man moved closer, clearly trying to use his physical presence to intimidate her. You're making a mistake. Things have been relatively mild so far, but they don't have to stay that way. Is that a threat? Maya asked. It's a reality check, Brittany replied. You're one person with limited resources and no real connections. We're part of a community that's been here long before you arrived and will be here long after you leave. Think carefully about which side of this conflict you want to be on. Maya was about to respond when she heard footsteps approaching from across the parking lot. Marcus emerged from the shadows near the diner's delivery entrance, moving with the purposeful stride she had learned to recognize. He must have been waiting and watching, she realized, ready to intervene if the situation escalated beyond her ability to handle. Evening, everyone, he said pleasantly as he approached. Maya, are you ready to head home? The dynamic shifted immediately. Brittany and her companions had clearly not expected Marcus to appear, and his calm confidence disrupted their attempt to corner and intimidate Maya. We were just having a conversation, the smaller man said, though he had moved several steps back from Maya's car. I can see that, Marcus replied. Conversations are good. They help people understand each other better. Maya, did you feel like this conversation was productive? Maya looked at each of her harassers in turn, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time. Brittany looked younger and less certain without her usual audience. The two men seemed uncomfortable with Marcus's presence and eager to disengage from the situation. Actually, yes, Maya said, surprising everyone, including herself. I think we've all been very clear about where we stand. There's nothing left to discuss. Marcus nodded approvingly. Excellent. Clear communication prevents misunderstandings.
He looked directly at Brittany and her companions.
I'm sure everyone here wants to focus on their education and future goals rather than getting distracted by interpersonal conflicts. There was something in his tone that carried an unmistakable message. This situation was over, and continuing it would have consequences none of them wanted to face. Brittany was the first to break. Come on, she said to her companions. We're done here. As they walked away, she turned back once to look at Maya. The expression on her face was no longer angry or threatening. It was disappointed and perhaps even hurt, as if she genuinely couldn't understand why Maya wouldn't accept the social order she was trying to establish. As Maya and Marcus drove away from the diner, she felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. The immediate threat seemed to be over, but she realized how much the experience had changed her. Do you think that's really the end of it? She asked. Marcus considered the question seriously. I think the organized campaign is over. They've invested a lot of time and energy in trying to force you out, and tonight made it clear that strategy isn't working. But you should stay alert for a while. Sometimes people lash out when they feel they've lost control. Over the following weeks, Maya's prediction proved accurate. The systematic harassment stopped almost completely, but there were occasional incidents that felt like last-ditch attempts to reassert dominance. Someone slashed one of her tires. Anonymous emails continued sporadically. She occasionally felt like she was being watched or followed, though never as intensively as before. More importantly, Maya began to rebuild her academic and social life. With the constant stress of harassment reduced, her grades improved dramatically. She started participating more actively in class discussions and began forming tentative friendships with other students who had previously seemed too intimidated by the social dynamics to reach out. Dr. Cole. Williams noticed the change immediately. Maya, I don't know what shifted for you over the past few weeks, but you seem like a completely different student, she observed during one of their meetings. You're engaging with the material at a much deeper level. Maya smiled, thinking of Marcus and the lessons he had taught her about standing ground and protecting herself. I learned some things about advocating for myself, she replied. It's made a difference in how I approach everything. As the semester progressed, Maya's relationship with Marcus evolved from protective alliance to genuine friendship. He shared more about his military experience and his struggles with transitioning to civilian life. She learned that he had left the Navy SEALs after losing several close friends in a mission that went wrong, and that helping her had given him a sense of purpose he had been missing. "You know," he told her one evening as they sat on his balcony watching the sunset over the ocean, "I thought I was helping you, but it turns out you were helping me too. I needed to remember that protection and service don't have to happen on a battlefield." Maya looked out at the waves, thinking about how much her life had changed since that first day when she had walked through the campus doors full of hope and determination. The experience had been traumatic and difficult, but it had also taught her things about resilience and courage that she never would have learned in a classroom. She graduated 2 years later with highest honors and was accepted into a competitive graduate program in marine conservation. Marcus attended her graduation ceremony, proud and beaming as she walked across the stage. Brittany was there too, graduating with her own degree, and when their eyes met across the crowded auditorium, Brittany nodded slightly. Not quite an apology, but perhaps an acknowledgement that they had both learned and grown from their conflict. Maya went on to become the marine biology teacher she had always dreamed of being. She specialized in working with students who felt like outsiders or struggled with confidence, using her own experience to help them understand that persistence and courage could overcome almost any obstacle. Marcus eventually started a security consulting firm that specialized in protecting people from stalking and harassment. Maya was his first official client testimonial, and they remained close friends for years afterward. Sometimes the most profound growth comes from the most difficult challenges. Maya's story became a reminder that standing up for yourself isn't always about fighting back. Sometimes it's about refusing to accept that someone else has the right to determine your worth or your place in the world. And sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected sources, in the form of a neighbor who understands that true strength is used to protect others, not to dominate them.